The message arrived during Earth's darkest hour. Captain Elena Santos stood at the observation deck of the ESS Horizon, watching as repair drones worked to patch the hull damage from humanity's latest skirmish with the Drachnid pirates. The battle had been costly, but necessary. The pirates had been targeting civilian transport ships, and the Earth Space Force wouldn't stand for that. "Captain," Lieutenant Chen's voice crackled through her comm. "We're picking up something strange. A signal, but it's not like anything in our database." Elena's eyes narrowed. Source: the Perseus Arm. Specifically, a system that's been marked as prohibited by the Galactic Council. That got her attention. The Galactic Council, that collection of ancient spacefaring races who viewed humanity as barely more than clever primates, rarely bothered to mark anything as prohibited. Usually, they simply didn't tell younger races about dangerous areas at all. "Put it through to my station." A holographic display flickered to life, showing a chaotic stream of data. But beneath the corruption and degradation, Elena could make out clear patterns. This wasn't random space noise. This was a language. A cry for help. "Get me Dr. Patel," she ordered. "If anyone can decode this, it's her." Dr. Amara Patel was the ship's xenolinguist, and possibly the finest translator humanity had produced since first contact 30 years ago. Within hours, she had begun to unravel the message's meaning. "It's from a species called the Killerans," Amara explained, her dark eyes bright with excitement and concern. "Their star is dying. No, more than dying. It's changing. Becoming something else. They'd been reaching out for help for nearly a decade, but everyone's ignored them." Elena felt her jaw tighten. Everyone. Even the Galactic Council. Especially the Council. According to this, they declared the situation beyond intervention and quarantined the entire sector. They're just letting these people die. The captain's hands clenched into fists. She'd seen this before. The Council's tendency to write off entire civilizations as acceptable losses in the name of maintaining galactic stability. It was one of the reasons Earth had refused full membership in their organization, despite the economic consequences. "How many Kilorans are we talking about?" "Billions," Amara whispered. "Their civilization spans 3 worlds in their home system. But if these readings are correct, they have less than a standard year before their star's transformation reaches critical mass." When that happens, she didn't need to finish the sentence. Elena activated her comm. "Get me a direct line to Earth Command. Priority 1. The response from Earth was swift, but not what she expected. Instead of the usual bureaucratic hesitation, she found herself face to face with Admiral Helena Chen, the head of the entire Earth Space Force. "We've been monitoring your discovery, Captain," the Admiral said without preamble, "and we've already begun preparations." Elena blinked. "Ma'am, the Council warned us explicitly not to interfere, said it would be seen as a violation of galactic law and could result in sanctions against Earth." A ghost of a smile crossed the Admiral's weathered face. "We're going anyway." The whole Council opposed this, even the Arxer. The Arxer were known as the most humanitarian of the elder races, all of them. They claimed the star's transformation could trigger a cascade effect, destabilizing that entire sector of space. They're not wrong. The risk is real. But we've run the numbers, Captain. There's a chance, a small one, but a chance to save those people. And that's all humanity has ever needed. Elena felt a fierce pride burn in her chest. This was why she joined the Space Force, not for glory or power, but to make a difference, to help. "What are my orders, Admiral?" "You're to proceed to the Kelleran system immediately. The ESS Artemis and ESS Hyperion will rendezvous with you en route. Your mission is to assess the situation and begin evacuation preparations. We're mobilizing every transport ship we can spare, but it won't be enough. You'll need to find creative solutions. And if we encounter Council resistance," the Admiral's expression hardened, You are authorized to defend yourself and the Killorans, but avoid escalation if possible. We're not looking to start a war. We're trying to prevent a genocide." After the transmission ended, Alina stood in silence for a long moment, watching the stars. Humanity was about to challenge the entire galactic order, risking everything to save a species they'd never met. Some would call it foolish, reckless. But Alina knew better. This was who they were. This was what humanity did best, defying impossible odds to do what was right. "Lieutenant Chen," she called out, "plot a course for the Killoran system. Maximum speed." As the Horizon's engine spooled up to full power, Alina made a silent promise to those distant voices crying out in the dark. Help was coming. Hope was coming. Humanity was coming. The ESS Horizon's journey to the Killoran system was anything but peaceful. Within hours of their departure, the warnings began flooding in. First came the diplomatic protests, then the threats of sanctions, and finally the direct ultimatums from the Galactic Council itself. Admiral Chen's hologram flickered as she delivered the latest update. "The Meraxian Federation has threatened to close their trade routes to Earth vessels," she reported grimly. "The Arxer have suspended our access to their scientific databases. And the Venari." She paused, her expression darkening. "They're mobilizing their defense fleet." Captain Alina Santos absorbed the news without flinching. "They're trying to intimidate us into turning back." "Succeeding with some," the Admiral admitted. "The European Space Coalition is wavering. The Pacific Alliance is calling for a review of the mission. But Earth Command's position remains unchanged. We proceed." The transmission ended, leaving Alina alone with the weight of consequences. Earth was gambling its future on this mission. Their economy, their diplomatic relations, their standing in the galactic community, all of it could crumble if they failed. Dr. Amara Patel's voice drew her from her thoughts. "Captain, I've finished analyzing the latest Killoran transmissions. It's worse than we thought." The xenolinguist's hands trembled as she pulled up the data. The Killoran star had accelerated its transformation. Strange energies pulsed from its core, warping the fabric of space-time around it. The outer planets were already beginning to show signs of orbital decay. "Their evacuation efforts?" Alina asked. "Chaotic. Their society is fracturing under the pressure. Some refuse to leave their homes, believing their gods will save them. Others are fighting over the few space-worthy vessels they have left. And their leadership." Amara shook her head. "They're paralyzed by fear and indecision." Lieutenant Chen interrupted with urgent news. "Captain, multiple ships dropping out of FTL ahead. Signatures match Venari warships." Alina's jaw tightened. The Venari were the Council's enforcers, notorious for their absolute dedication to maintaining galactic order. Battle stations. Shields up, but weapons remain cold. "Let's see what they want." The Venari commander appeared on screen, his crystalline features arranged in what Alina had learned to recognize as contempt. "Captain Santos, you are entering a quarantine sector in violation of Council directive. Return to Earth space immediately." "We're on a humanitarian mission, Commander. The Killorans." "The Killorans are not your concern," he cut her off. "Their fate was sealed the moment their star began its transformation. The Council has determined that intervention poses an unacceptable risk to galactic stability." Alina leaned forward. "And what about the risk to billions of innocent lives?" "A regrettable but necessary sacrifice to prevent greater catastrophe. This is your final warning, Captain. Return to Earth space, or we will be forced to fire upon your vessel." The bridge fell silent. This was the moment that would define everything. Their mission, their principles, perhaps even humanity's future in the galaxy. Alina stood, her voice steady and clear. "Commander, I want you to understand something about humans. We've faced extinction-level events before. Ice ages, plagues, nuclear war. Each time, we survived not by abandoning the vulnerable, but by coming together. By refusing to accept that any life was expendable." She took a step closer to the screen. We're going to help the Kalorans, not because it's easy or safe, but because it's right. You can either help us or try to stop us. But know this, if you fire on this ship, you'll be starting a war. Not just with Earth, but with the very principles of compassion and duty that civilized species are supposed to stand for. The Venari commander's crystalline features shifted in what might have been surprise. For a long moment, neither spoke. Finally, he responded. You would risk everything, your standing, your safety, your very survival, for a species you've never even met. Without hesitation, Elena replied, That's what makes us human. Another long pause. Then, remarkably, the Venari ships began to move aside, creating a clear path through their blockade. Proceed, Captain Santos, the commander said quietly. But know that the Council will not forget this defiance. As the horizon moved past the Venari fleet, Elena felt a mix of relief and apprehension. They had won this confrontation without bloodshed, but the real challenges still lay ahead. The Kiloran star was deteriorating faster than expected, and they had no guarantee their rescue plan would work. But they had shown the galaxy something important today. Humanity wouldn't be cowed into abandoning its principles. They would face whatever came next with the same determination that had brought them to the stars in the first place. Set course for the Kiloran system, Elena ordered. Maximum speed. We've got people to save. The horizon surged forward, its engines burning bright against the darkness of space. Behind them, the Venari ships remained motionless, their crews perhaps pondering the strange species that would risk everything to save strangers. Humanity was about to teach the galaxy a lesson about compassion. The only question was, would they survive long enough to see it through? The Kiloran system blazed like a wound in space. Through the horizon's forward viewport, Captain Elena Santos watched their destination grow closer. A star that should have been yellow-white was instead a churning mass of purple-black energy, its surface riddled with quantum distortions that defied the laws of physics themselves. Status report, she commanded, her voice steady despite the unsettling view. Dr. Marcus Wong, the ship's chief scientist, looked up from his instruments with obvious concern. The star's core is undergoing some kind of quantum cascade effect. It's not just dying. It's transforming into something else entirely. The space-time distortions are even worse than our long-range scan suggested. Can we safely approach the inner system? If we modify our shields to emit a reverse tachyon field, we should be able to resist the worst of the distortions. But I wouldn't recommend getting closer than the orbit of their fourth planet. Elena nodded grimly. Lieutenant Chen, begin broadcasting on all frequencies. Let them know we're here to help. For several tense minutes, there was no response. Then the comm system crackled to life with a message in heavily accented galactic standard. Unknown vessels, this is High Secretary Verrill of the Kiloran Unity. Your presence here is unexpected. Dr. Patel quickly analyzed the transmission. There's a lot of confusion and suspicion in their tone patterns, Captain. They're not sure whether to trust us. Elena stepped forward. High Secretary, I am Captain Elena Santos of the Earth Space Force. We received your distress signal, and we're here to help evacuate your people. A long pause followed. When Verrill spoke again, his voice carried a mix of hope and bitter skepticism. Help. The great powers of the galaxy declared our system forbidden. They left us to die. Why would humans, barely spacefaring by galactic standards, choose to help when they would not? Because it's the right thing to do. Elena replied simply. We've brought ships, resources, and a plan, but we'll need your cooperation to make it work. Will you meet with us? Another pause, longer this time. Finally, we will send coordinates for a secure meeting facility on Kalora Prime. But be warned, any hostile action will be met with immediate force. We have little left to lose. As the coordinates came through, Elena gathered her senior staff. The plan they'd developed en route was ambitious, perhaps impossible, but it was the Kilorans' only hope. Hours later, Elena stood in a vast chamber within the Kiloran capital city. The architecture was both beautiful and alien, sweeping crystalline structures that seemed to defy gravity. But signs of decay were everywhere. Cracks spider webbed through the crystal walls, and the air itself felt wrong, charged with strange energies from the dying star. High Secretary Verrill was tall and graceful, his iridescent scales shifting colors with his movements. Around him stood other Killoran leaders, their postures tense and defensive. The fear in the room was palpable. "You say you have a plan," Verrill began without preamble. "Speak it." Elena activated a holographic display showing their proposed evacuation strategy. "We've brought 3 capital ships and 12 large transport vessels. More are on the way. But you're right, it won't be enough to evacuate everyone traditionally." She gestured to Dr. Wong, who stepped forward with another hologram, this one showing a complex series of calculations. "We've developed a method to create stable wormholes using the quantum energy being released by your star. It's risky, but if it works, we can evacuate entire cities at once." The Killoran scientists in the room burst into animated discussion, their scales flickering with excitement and skepticism. "What you propose is theoretical," one of them protested. "It has never been attempted at this scale." "We know," Elena admitted. "But we also know that without intervention, your entire civilization will be lost within months. We're offering a chance, maybe your only chance." Verrill's scales darkened to a deep blue, an expression of deep thought. Dr. Patel had explained. "And what do you want in return? Surely humans have not come all this way," defied the council, merely out of altruism. Elena met his gaze steadily. "What we want is to save your people. That's all. Earth remembers what it's like to face extinction alone. We won't let it happen to others, not if we can help it." A younger Killoran suddenly pushed forward. "High Secretary, we cannot trust them. They could be here to steal our technology, to take advantage of our weakness." "Your technology." Elena's voice carried a note of sad amusement. "With respect, your technology isn't what matters right now. Your people matter. Your culture, your history, your future. That's what we're here to save. Help us do that, and you can keep your secrets." The chamber fell silent. Verrill studied Elena for a long moment, his scales shifting through a complex pattern of colors. Finally, he spoke. "In all our history, no species has ever offered aid without demanding something in return. Perhaps that is why the galaxy has grown so cold." He straightened to his full height. "We accept your help, Captain Santos. May your actions match your words." As the meeting concluded and plans began to take shape, Elena felt the weight of billions of lives settling onto her shoulders. The evacuation would be unlike anything humanity had ever attempted. Success would redefine what was possible. Failure would mean the end of an entire civilization, and possibly devastating consequences for Earth. But as she looked out at the dying star that threatened this ancient species, Elena felt something else too. Certainty. This was why humanity had reached for the stars. Not for power or glory, but for moments like this. Chances to prove that compassion could bridge the gulf between worlds. The real work was about to begin. The evacuation of Killora began with a triumph. The first wormhole stabilized perfectly, a shimmering portal large enough to move thousands at once. Through it, the first wave of Killoran refugees reached the safe haven Earth had prepared in the Proxima Centauri system. For a brief moment, it seemed the impossible might actually be possible. Then everything went wrong. "Captain." Dr. Wong's voice carried an edge of panic as alarms blared across the Horizon's bridge. "The star, it's accelerating its decay. The quantum cascade has reached a critical point." Elena rushed to the science station, watching in horror as the readings spiked. The dying star's transformation was happening far faster than their models had predicted. Purple-black energy writhed across its surface, reaching out like hungry tentacles into space. "How long?" she demanded. "Hours, not days. The quantum distortions are growing exponentially. They'll tear the system apart before we can complete the evacuation." On the main viewer, she could see the rescue operation in full swing. Dozens of ships, human and Kelleran alike, ferried people to the wormhole points. But they'd barely evacuated a fraction of the population. Millions still remained on Calora Prime alone. High Secretary Verrill is requesting emergency communication, Lieutenant Chen reported. The Keloran leader's image appeared on screen, his scales a pale, sickly color. Captain Santos, our scientists confirm your readings. The star's death throes are accelerating beyond all predictions. We cannot save everyone. We're not giving up, Alina insisted. We can open more wormholes, increase the transit speed, and risk destabilizing the entire region of space, Verrill interrupted. The Council was right about one thing. If we push too hard against these quantum forces, we could trigger a cascade that would threaten dozens of inhabited systems. A heavy silence fell over the bridge. They'd known this was a possibility, that saving the Kelorans might come at too high a price. But facing that reality was something else entirely. Dr. Patel suddenly straightened at her station. Captain, I'm picking up unusual readings from the Kelloran Central Archives. They're deleting their databases, erasing their history. Belina felt her blood run cold. High Secretary, what are you doing? Verrill's scales rippled with grief. What must be done? We are implementing our final contingency. Those we cannot save will trigger our civilization's self-destruct protocols. Better a quick end than being torn apart by the star's death throes. No. Alina's voice cracked like a whip. Belay that order immediately. There's still a chance. Chance for what? Verrill demanded. To watch more of my people suffer. To risk devastating other worlds in a futile attempt to save our own. Alina gripped the edge of her console, her mind racing. Everything they'd done, all the risks they'd taken, it couldn't end like this. There had to be a way. Then she saw it. A crazy, impossible idea, but one that might just work. Dr. Wong, she called out. The quantum energy from the star. We've been trying to work around it, protect ourselves from it. What if we worked with it instead? The scientist blinked. What do you mean? The star isn't just dying, it's transforming, changing into something else. What if we could guide that transformation? Use the energy it's releasing to power not just a few wormholes, but hundreds of them. That's insane, Wong protested. The calculations alone would be. The Horizon's quantum computers can handle it, Alina interrupted. And we'll network with every other ship in the fleet. We're not just fighting physics here, we're fighting for lives. She turned back to Verrill's image. High Secretary, I need you to trust us one more time. Delay your contingency plan. Give us one more hour. Verrill studied her for a long moment, his scales shifting through complex patterns. Why do you persist? Why risk everything for people you barely know? Because that's what humanity does, Alina replied. We see the impossible, and we try anyway. We face the darkness, and we fight anyway. Give us 1 hour, and we'll show you why the galaxy needs to remember that spirit. Another long pause. Then, 1 hour, Captain Santos. Make it count. What followed was perhaps the most intense hour in human space exploration history. Every ship in the fleet linked their computers together, creating a vast neural network. Dr. Wong and his team worked frantically to rewrite their wormhole equations, while Kelloran scientists shared everything they knew about quantum mechanics. The star continued its violent transformation, each pulse of energy threatening to tear the system apart. But now, instead of fighting against those pulses, they began to work with them. Each quantum surge was captured, channeled, used to power new wormholes. Portals began opening everywhere, not just a few large ones, but hundreds of smaller ones. Every ship became a node in a vast transportation web, catching refugees and passing them along through multiple jumps to safety. It was dangerous, chaotic, and utterly unprecedented. The energy requirements were enormous, and more than once the Horizon's systems threatened to overload. But they held. They endured. 50 minutes into their final hour, Dr. Wong looked up from his console with tears in his eyes. "Captain, we did it. The last transport is away. We got them all." Elena stared at the confirmation readings in disbelief. They'd evacuated an entire civilization in less than a day. The impossible had become possible through sheer human determination and the courage to try what no one else would dare. As the fleet prepared for emergency departure, High Secretary Verrill transmitted one final message. "Captain Santos, humanity has taught us something today. Something the galaxy had forgotten. Thank you for reminding us that compassion is not weakness, and that no cause is truly lost while someone still fights for it." The horizon barely escaped as the star began its final collapse. But as they jumped to safety, Elena knew they'd done more than save a species. They'd shown the galaxy what humanity truly stood for: hope, courage, and the unshakable belief that every life was worth fighting for. The real question was, how would the galaxy respond to that lesson? 1 month after the Kiloran evacuation, Captain Elena Santos stood before the Galactic Council. The great chamber on Alpha Centauri, built to accommodate representatives from every spacefaring species, was packed to capacity. This wasn't just a debriefing, it was a reckoning. The Veneri speaker rose first, his crystalline form catching the light. "Captain Santos, you violated a council quarantine, risked a quantum cascade that could have devastated multiple systems, and defied the direct orders of species far older and more experienced than humanity. How do you justify these actions?" Elena stood straight, her voice clear and unwavering. "I don't need to justify saving billions of lives, Speaker. The results speak for themselves." "Results." The Arxer representative leaned forward, his feathered crest rippling. "You got lucky, Captain. Your reckless actions could have failed." Elena interrupted. "Yes, they could have. But doing nothing would have guaranteed failure. The difference between humanity and the Council seems to be that we're willing to risk failure to do what's right." Murmurs rippled through the chamber. On a raised platform, High Secretary Verrill and a delegation of Kelleran refugees watched silently, their scales shifting with emotion. "You speak of doing what's right," the Meraxian delegate growled. "But who are you to make such judgments? Your species is barely out of its gravity well. You know nothing of the complexities of galactic politics." "Perhaps that's exactly why we succeeded where you failed," Elena countered. "We haven't learned to accept tragedy as inevitable. We haven't forgotten what it means to help others simply because it's right." She activated a holographic display, showing recordings from the evacuation. "Look at what we achieved. Not just the rescue itself, but the advances we made. The quantum channeling technology we developed could revolutionize space travel. The emergency response protocols we created could save countless lives in future disasters. And what of the precedent you've set?" the Veneri speaker demanded. "Will humanity now interfere every time a civilization faces crisis?" "If we can help, yes." Elena's response was immediate and firm. "That's who we are. That's what we do. And I think you all know, deep down, that's what you should be doing too." Silence fell over the chamber. The council members exchanged glances, their expressions unreadable. Then, unexpectedly, High Secretary Verrill rose to speak. "Honored Council," his voice carried the weight of his people's experience. "For millennia, my species looked to you for guidance. We believed you represented the pinnacle of civilization. But when we needed you most, you turned away. It took a young species, one you considered primitive, to show us what true civilization looks like." He gestured to the Kelleran delegation. "We are not just survivors now. We are witnesses to what happens when compassion triumphs over fear, when courage overcomes caution. The humans didn't just save our lives, they saved our faith in the very idea of galactic community." The chamber erupted in discussion. Species that had stood apart for centuries began to engage with each other, debating the implications of what had happened. The Council's unity, long based on maintaining the status quo, was cracking in the face of humanity's example. Admiral Chen, who had been silently observing, stepped forward. "We didn't come here today to apologize or to seek your approval. We came to tell you that things are going to change. Humanity is here to stay, and we will not stand idly by while preventable tragedies unfold." "You would challenge the entire established order?" the Arxer representative asked, but his tone held more curiosity than hostility now. "We already have," Alina replied, "and we'll keep doing it every time we need to. But we'd rather work with you than against you. Help us build a galaxy where no one gets left behind, where being advanced means more than just having powerful technology. It means having the courage to use that power to help others." The debate continued for hours, but something fundamental had shifted. Species that had been silent for generations began to speak up. Younger civilizations, emboldened by Earth's example, started offering their own perspectives on galactic governance. As the session concluded, Alina found herself approached by the Veneri speaker. "You have disrupted 10,000 years of established protocol," he said quietly. "Yes," Alina agreed. "Was it worth it?" The speaker's crystalline features shifted in what might have been a smile. "Perhaps it was time for disruption. We had forgotten something important, something your species somehow remembered despite your youth." "What's that?" "That the true measure of civilization is not its age or its power, but its capacity for compassion." The changes that followed would reshape galactic society. The Kelleran rescue became a catalyst for reform, inspiring a new era of cooperation and humanitarian intervention. Other species began to remember their own histories, their own moments of crisis when others had helped them survive and grow. Humanity's reputation transformed from that of upstart newcomers to moral leaders, not because they were perfect, but because they were willing to try, to risk, to fight for what they believed in. On the horizon's observation deck, Alina watched the stars with new eyes. They had done more than save one species. They had reminded the galaxy of its better nature. And that, perhaps, was the greatest victory of all. "Captain," Lieutenant Chen called out, "we're picking up another distress signal. Different source this time." Alina smiled. There would always be more challenges, more chances to prove what humanity stood for. "Plot a course, Lieutenant. Someone needs our help." The stars stretched into streaks of light as the horizon jumped to FTL, carrying humanity's promise of hope to yet another corner of the galaxy. They had changed the rules of what was possible, and there was no going back. The galaxy would never be the same, and that was exactly what it needed.